Imagine that very night when her scent first drove you crazy. Remember that electric shock when your hands traced the curves of her body and her heavy, hot breath burned your neck. In those moments, her skin felt like silk, her eyes promised absolute devotion, and inside you pulsed a wild, animalistic certainty that this fire would never go out. You looked at her and saw an ideal, a woman for whom you wanted to move mountains, the one who would quench your eternal masculine thirst. But time passes, and one day you wake up in that same bed, look at her back turned to the wall, and feel nothing but a piercing, ringing cold. Where did that insatiable lioness go? And why is there a stranger in her place? A constantly dissatisfied person connected to you only by a shared roof and a set of household habits. You ask yourself in the silence if this is really the end, if the expiration date of your passion has passed, and if only a gray, faceless routine lies ahead. This pain is familiar to millions of men, but society cowardly keeps silent about it, preferring to feed us sweet illusions about eternal romance. Today, I will destroy this lie to the ground. We will dissect relationships without anesthesia or sentimentality. You will learn the hidden mechanics of how connections between a man and a woman develop, and why what you thought was the end of love is actually just a brutal test of your maturity. We will go through a series of inevitable transformations that grind down 90% of couples. But the main reason you should listen to this until the very last second is the secret of the final seventh phase. I will mention it only in passing because you cannot touch it without going through all the circles of purification. This is a level where a man gains absolute invulnerability, total peace, and a form of intimacy that surpasses any youthful passion in its power. If you drop out of the race earlier, you are doomed to run in circles forever, changing women, but staying with that same sucking emptiness inside. But if you reach the end, you will get the key to mastering any female psychology. Therefore, before we dive into this harsh truth, take one simple step. Like this material right now as a sign that you are ready to take off your rose-colored glasses. And if you are here for the first time and looking for knowledge that works like a sharpened blade, be sure to subscribe to The Hidden Mind. Your like is the fuel for our research, and ahead of you is information that will forever change the way you look at women. Let us go back to that very starting point from which absolutely every romance begins, along with the vast majority of male disappointments that lead to a loss of control over your own life. Remember the first months of your acquaintance, when the reality around you seems to dissolve in a thick, sticky fog of primal attraction. You look at this woman, and your brain, intoxicated by a powerful biochemical cocktail of dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins, refuses to think critically. During this period, every feature of hers seems like a work of art to you. You revel in the sound of her voice, the curve of her neck when she turns her head, her soft, inviting laugh. The bedroom turns into the epicenter of your universe, where time loses its meaning. Her skin burning your palms, the wet gleam of her eyes when she arches her back to meet your touch, that incomparable scent of a heated female body, all of this takes you into absolute, total captivity. From a biological point of view, at this moment, you are under a chemical attack, the goal of which is to make you commit the reproductive act without thinking about the consequences. Dopamine in your brain works like a powerful drug. It highlights in your partner only those qualities that you want to see and completely blocks the centers of logic and risk assessment. You stop seeing the real woman. Instead, you see only a projection of your desires. You think you have found the one, the only ideal companion who understands you without words. But in reality, you just found that very puzzle piece that currently fits perfectly into the empty spaces of your own ego. It seems to you that you have found a woman who will always look at you with this primal, insatiable hunger. You lie next to each other, exhausted and happy, arms and legs intertwined, and in your masculine chest ripens an ironclad certainty that now your life has fallen into place. But it is precisely in this moment of deep physical satisfaction that the most dangerous psychological trap slams shut. The ultimate irony of nature is that during this period, you both turn into virtuoso hypocrites. You do not show her your fatigue, your doubts, or bad habits, and she hides her true demands, whims, and the dark sides of her character. You do not love a living person. You love a hologram, a flawless phantom that you yourself designed in your head on a wave of animal passion. The famous psychoanalyst Erich Fromm described this illusion very accurately in his work. He said that people make a fatal mistake, confusing the sudden collapse of walls between two strangers with the true art of love. Fromm warned that this feeling of sudden, consuming intimacy, this mirage of complete unity, is short-lived by nature. It is not a foundation for a building, it is just a bright flash on the horizon that will inevitably go out, leaving you in complete darkness if you do not know how to build anything other than castles in the air. Nature gives you this hormonal loan for only one purpose, so that you have time to pass on your genes, and then nature washes its hands, leaving you face to face with harsh reality. Imagine that you are building a house on a swamp, hoping that decorative wallpaper will hold the walls up. This is exactly what a man does when trying to build a relationship at the stage of a hormonal explosion. He invests all his resources, all his attention into something that by definition has an expiration date. And when this date expires, he finds himself on the ashes with a feeling of betrayal, although in fact no one betrayed him. It is just that a biological cycle has ended. Recognizing this fact is the first step to masculine maturity. You must understand that your infatuation is not a gift from the gods, but a hormonal program that you need to be able to recognize, isolate, and channel in a constructive direction before it destroys your personality to the ground. Therefore, I call you to sobriety. The next time you feel this euphoria, when your heart is pounding in your chest and dreams of an ideal are pulsing in your head, just stop for a second. Take a breath of cold air and tell yourself, this is biochemistry at work. This is my brain trying to deprive me of the ability to see things as they are. If you learn to distance yourself from this hormonal flare-up, you will be able to notice details that others miss. You will see how she reacts to a waiter, how she behaves in a conflict, how she treats her obligations. This is the beginning of true masculine analysis that will save you from decades of suffering in the future. Sooner or later, the hormonal storm subsides, and this is a biological axiom that is as useless to argue with as it is to argue with the sun setting. This transition usually takes from 10 to 20 months, after which your brain, exhausted by the endless production of neurotransmitters, returns to its factory settings. The chemical haze dissipates like morning fog under the first rays of the sun, and you begin to notice what was previously hidden behind the veil of erotic hypnosis. And the first signs of this sobering up always hit a man's ego through physical distance. You suddenly notice that she no longer reaches for you every free second. In bed, lace lingerie is replaced by cozy flannel pajamas, and instead of hot embraces, she increasingly turns to the wall, wrapping herself in a blanket with words about being tired at work or having a headache. The very primal hunger in her eyes that drove you crazy is replaced by a calm and sometimes frankly bored look. You feel physically cold next to a woman who was burning in your arms just yesterday, and this cold penetrates the very essence of your relationship. You sit at the same table, drinking your morning coffee, but an invisible glass wall seems to grow between you. Small, inexplicable criticisms begin. What once seemed to her a charming quirk of your character now causes her open irritation. And you, in turn, catch yourself thinking that her voice has become too harsh, her words sound like accusations. And instead of a perfect goddess, you see an ordinary, tired woman with her own complex issues. This is the stage where you encounter the phenomenon of stimulus habituation. In psychology, this is called hedonic adaptation. Your brain has stopped reacting to her presence as a reward. You have already studied every mole, every intonation, every turn of her head, and there is no longer that sharp sense of novelty that kept the fire of passion burning. But here lies a crucial lesson for a man of 40 to 70 years old. Satiation is not a death sentence for a relationship. It is a signal to move to a new level of functioning. You must understand that your biological system requires a change in strategy, from capture to retention and creation. It is here that 90% of men make their main fatal mistake. Feeling this cold insatiation, a man begins to panic. An inner voice whispers to him that he made the wrong choice, that love has died. That passion is gone forever. The man starts to look around wistfully, remembering the euphoria of the beginning, and he gets the treacherous thought of finding a new woman to get another dose of this hormonal drug. It seems to him that with someone else it will be different, that the fire will not go out there. But this is the greatest self-deception. By running away at this stage, you simply reset the counter and once again become a slave to your instincts, never growing up, never knowing what a real, deep connection is. This state can be compared to driving a high-speed race car. As long as you are flying straight in first gear, the car is obedient. But as soon as the track starts to curve, many drivers let go of the wheel, afraid of skidding. Satiation is the beginning of a winding track. If you ease off the gas or get out of the car, you will lose the race. If you learn to enter the turns smoothly, using other control mechanisms, you will realize that at this stage the relationship becomes no less interesting, but more stable. You begin to see her not just as an object of desire, but as a partner with whom you can plan not for the next weekend, but for years to come. But for this, you need to stop being a hostage to your testosterone and turn on your reason, which has been sleeping for so long while you were in the hypnosis phase. It is very important for me to understand how honest you are with yourselves right now. Let us conduct a short poll. Think about your past or current relationships. Have you ever been in this frightening situation where suddenly, for no apparent reason, a hot and affectionate woman suddenly became distant and cold, as if she had been replaced? Write a plus sign in the comments if you have been through this icy alienation, and a minus sign if you somehow managed to avoid it. Your honesty in the comments shows that we are not discussing empty theories, but the living pain of men. And remember, if this breakdown hits your target and you find the answers you have been looking for years here, you can become a sponsor of The Hidden Mind. By becoming a sponsor, you directly give us the opportunity to dig even deeper, analyzing topics that others are afraid to even touch. When you pass the stage of satiation, you inevitably face a moment of truth that many men mistake for a final breakup, although in reality, it is the moment of your birth as a personality. At this time, the last remnants of the hormonal veil fall from your eyes, and you suddenly see before you not the image of a goddess you invented, but a living, often contradictory person with all her weaknesses, selfishness, and, most unpleasantly, with a set of qualities that are in direct conflict with your inner principles. You suddenly realize that she was not going to be the submissive housewife, or, on the contrary, the daring adventurer you painted in your dreams. She behaves differently, reacts in her own way, and her logic often seems simply absurd to you. During this period, every word, every look is permeated with mutual disappointment because you both understood the person you fell in love with never existed. It was just a convenient phantom to satisfy your deep desires. Imagine that you bought a luxury car, expecting a silent ride. But after a couple of months of operation, the engine started to make a characteristic noise, and the suspension required adjustment. You are disappointed. You blame the manufacturer. You want to return the car. But the problem is not with the car. The problem is with your unrealistic expectations that you imposed on the object. In relationships, we do the same thing. We take a living person and stick our labels on them, demanding that they play the role we have written in the script of our ideal life. And when a partner starts to play their own, real role, we feel deceived. This is not deception. It is a clash of reality with your illusion. At this critical moment, a man often makes the most destructive mistake that deprives him of his masculine dignity. Instead of taking a sober look at reality, he starts to manipulate. He tries by force of will, reproaches, or a show of coldness to make the woman conform to the standards he created in the first stage. He begins to criticize her for every wrong action, tries to bend her to his ideal, not understanding that by doing so, he only causes her even more rejection. The harder you push, the faster she closes up, turning from a partner into an opponent. You find yourself in a trap. The more you want to quote zero, the further she moves away from you. This stage is a real test of maturity. It is here that Erich Fromm would have agreed with us, arguing that love is an active force capable of breaking down the walls between people, but only if this force is directed towards development, not suppression. If you try to quote want a woman to fit your expectations, you will destroy the most valuable thing in her individuality. And if you destroy her personality, what will be left next to you? An empty shell that will hate you. A mature man understands. The destruction of expectations is a necessary stage of purification. Only when your illusions burn away do you get a chance to see the real person standing in front of you. It is painful, it is unpleasant, it is a blow to the ego, but it is the единствен способ да се измъкнем от затворения кръг. Many men get stuck here for years, turning their lives into an endless series of petty conflicts. They live with a woman they despise for not being quote to, and they cannot leave because they are afraid of being alone. This is a neurotic form of existence that sucks the energy you need for achievements, for business, for your growth. But if you gather your courage and admit that your expectations were just your own fantasies, you will suddenly feel a strange, incomparable relief. This is the moment when you become free from your own fantasies. You begin to accept her not as a tool for your comfort, but as an equal partner who has the right to be imperfect, just as you have that right yourself. And it is from this moment that your path to a real, conscious life begins, where a relationship is not a battle over who will break whom, but a conscious cooperation of two people who know everything about each other's shortcomings. Reconciliation is not about capitulation or weakness. It is about the highest form of masculine self-control, which few men fully realize, remaining trapped in childish resentments. At this stage, you stop demanding the impossible from a woman. You stop trying to change her essence to fit your idealized standards, and this frees up a colossal amount of your inner energy. You begin to see her as a person with her own interest, with her own energy, which may be completely far from your expectations, but at the same time surprisingly valuable in itself. You accept her as she is, not as a function to satisfy your sexual or domestic needs, but as a separate, complex universe. This requires enormous inner work. It requires the ability to separate your projections from reality. And when you finally do it, you suddenly discover that life becomes easier, because that constant, exhausting tension of the struggle for control, which used to devour your thoughts even during work hours, is gone. A woman who sees that a man has stopped polishing and buffing her to his own requirements begins to open up from a completely different side. She no longer feels pressure, is not forced to defend herself, and in this silence of reconciliation, what you have been looking for so long can suddenly sprout. There is no place for aggression here. There are no more tantrums over trifles. Here appears that quiet, almost friendly intimacy that is the necessary foundation for everything that follows. But this is still not love in its highest manifestation. This is just preparation, an antechamber to that very level that we agreed not to talk about ahead of time. It is a state where a man gains the ability to see a woman without filters, realizing that her shortcomings are an integral part of her character, just as your shortcomings are part of your masculine individuality. However, it is important here not to fall into the trap of tolerance for the sake of peace. Many men at this stage begin to tolerate what should absolutely not be tolerated, confusing reconciliation with passive agreement to everything. Your task is not to lower the bar, but to raise it to a new level. Reconciliation is when you say to yourself, I accept this person with all his peculiarities, but I also clearly define the boundaries of my comfort and my dignity. You do not bend to a woman. You build a dialogue with her in which the interests of both sides are taken into account. This is the very moment when a man ceases to be a boy seeking approval and becomes the master of his life, who himself decides what he is ready to live with and what is fundamentally unacceptable to him. At this stage, you also begin to see that conflicts change their form. If before you quarreled because "you are not what I wanted," now you argue like two adults discussing a joint future. Disputes become constructive. You learn to hear her arguments without taking them personally, and to defend your positions without getting personal. This is a level of maturity at which you begin to understand that reconciliation is not the end of a relationship. It is its reboot with new software. You realize that if you want a woman who will be devoted to you, not out of fear, but out of deep respect, you must first become a man who respects her right to be herself. This is the very foundation on which the entire subsequent building of your intimacy is erected. It is at this point that you begin to feel that your relationship has ceased to be a roller coaster and has turned into a reliable, stable ship. You are no longer afraid of storms because you know how your partner behaves in a critical situation. You no longer expect a stab in the back because the transparency of your relationship has reached its maximum. This is the very era of male reconciliation, when you finally exhale and realize that you have found what you have been looking for all your life. Not an ideal object, but a living, real person with whom you can walk hand in hand without losing yourself in the process. But this is still not the final. Ahead of you is a level where respect is reforged into something more durable, into something that cannot be destroyed by any external circumstances. At this stage, the relationship enters a phase that most men in a panic mistake for a boring routine. Although in reality, it is the moment when your relationship acquires a true, indestructible density. Here, a man and a woman are no longer just living under the same roof. They are beginning to build a common space where each feels their importance without even saying a word about it. This is the stage when you begin to consciously care for each other, but you do it without that feverish obsession, without that youthful strain that used to only destroy your nerves and career. You begin to see the true value in having a person next to you who knows all your cracks, all your dark corners, has seen you in moments of weakness and defeat, and at the same time, consciously, coldly, and deliberately stays with you, accepting you completely as an established male figure. In this phase, respect ceases to be just a polite word. It becomes the very cement that holds the building of your relationship together, when all external passions have long since subsided and given way to reality. Many men, not understanding this process, are frightened by such ordinariness, considering it a sign of life fading. They begin to rush about, trying to artificially bring back the spark. They make scenes or look for adventures on the side, just to feel that hormonal kick to the brain again. But I will tell you otherwise. This is an escape. It is an admission of one's own inability to withstand the calmness of adult life. Understand that calmness is not the absence of life, it is the absence of chaos. When you reach this level, you become invulnerable to external shocks. Your self-esteem no longer depends on whether she said a kind word to you today or remained silent. You are no longer dependent on her mood, which used to be able to knock you off track for the entire workday. You acquire a real, deep, masculine strength that comes from your inner core. You begin to understand that love at this stage is not a feeling that happens to you. It is a conscious, daily choice. It is work on yourself that you do primarily for the sake of your integrity, for the sake of your dignity, for the sake of that masculine stability that cannot be bought or imitated. At this level, you also begin to see the true nature of partnership. You understand that the woman next to you is not a quote 10 to be guarded, and not quote 11 to be ordered around. She is a person with whom you share the burden of being. You see how she copes with her difficulties, how she grows, and you respect this process. And in return, you get an attitude that cannot be demanded by force. You begin to notice the details, how she supports you in your endeavors, how she understands your thoughts before you voice them, how she becomes your rear base where you can restore your strength after battles with the outside world. This is a level where petty domestic squabbles lose all meaning, because you both understand that you are on the same side of the barricades. If you have read this far and feel that this level of awareness is exactly what you have been missing for harmony in your life, you can support the development of the hidden mind by becoming a sponsor. This will allow us to continue our deep, dissecting analysis of relationships without censorship and unnecessary fluff. Helping men become stronger and wiser. Your support is an investment in the quality of knowledge that we pass on, and ahead of us is the transition to that very highest form of intimacy, which, in its power, surpasses any illusions of youth. We are almost at the goal, and each stage passed prepares you for what you will hear in the very final. When you have gone through all the previous stages, through the storms of hormonal tempests and the deserts of disappointment, you reach a level that I call the space of a strong alliance. And this is what very few strive for. This is the stage at which you cease to be just a couple living together out of habit or for social status, and become something qualitatively greater. Your connection no longer depends on how often you have sex or how successfully your last domestic conflict went. It is permeated with a deep, almost intuitive understanding that this person is your main ally in this crazy, constantly changing world. Here arises that rare form of intimacy between a man and a woman where you do not need to pretend, play roles, or choose your words to seem better than you are. You can be silent for hours in the same room, going about your business, and in this silence there will be more strength and closeness than in hours of passionate conversations in the first stage, where each of you was only trying to charm the other. This is a state where your home truly becomes your fortress, where you both feel protected from any external blows of fate. A man in this position realizes that he is not just, quote, 12 a woman. He is creating an environment in which both partners can unlock their potential. During this period, sex has ceased to be a way to prove one's worth, to assert oneself, or a way to relieve accumulated nervous tension after a hard day. It has become a form of deep, almost sacred communication. It is no longer just an animal act. It is an exchange of energy between two people who have studied each other down to the smallest reactions, down to the secret buttons, down to the most subtle nuances of arousal that casual partners do not know about. At this level, a man gains the ability to see a woman not as an object for consumption, but as a full-fledged partner in intelligence. You begin to notice that her support in your affairs, her faith in your decisions, her readiness to stand shoulder to shoulder in times of crisis. This is the real female power, much deeper and more significant than any external attributes. You realize that such a woman is a resource that cannot be accumulated. It is created only through years of mutual trust and respect. And in this calm, in this complete absence of the need to prove or conquer anything, lies that very, almost frightening power that keeps a woman by such a man's side forever. But even this level is not the limit, although many men get stuck here, enjoying well-deserved comfort. They relax, stop developing, and thereby begin to slowly, imperceptibly, lose the very connection they have been building for so long. In order not to lose this space, and not to let it turn into a swamp, you need to constantly keep in mind that very final seventh step. It stands beyond everything you have known about relationships before this moment. This is the very place where a man becomes truly invulnerable, because his happiness is no longer tied to an external object. You have achieved what everyone around you fears and desires, absolute inner freedom within a committed relationship. And now we are moving on to the most important thing, to the very architecture that you have to realize in order to bring your life to perfection. We have come to the moment for which you have gone through all these trials, through the pain of disappointment and the cold of alienation, through the breaking of your own selfish ideas about what a woman should be. The seventh stage, the one that almost no one talks about out loud, because most people are afraid of even the thought of such a degree of freedom, is the level where love ceases to be a random gift of fate and becomes an architectural project of your spirit. This is the stage at which a man gains complete, absolute self-sufficiency. You no longer need a woman as a source of your happiness, as a way to fill your inner holes, or as a mirror for your ever-hungry ego. You are absolutely whole within yourself. Your joy, your peace, and your energy are your personal inner capital. And it is this wholeness of yours that makes you, in the eyes of a woman, an object that cannot be ignored or replaced. At this stage, the relationship turns into a conscious union of two free individuals who have chosen each other not because they have nowhere else to be, not because they are afraid of loneliness or have no one to share their life with, but because together they are able to create something greater than each of them individually. This is the level at which you control not only your own life, but also influence the space around you, because you are no longer afraid of losing her. Paradoxically, it is at the very moment when a man is internally ready to let his woman go at any second, because he is completely self-sufficient, it is at this moment that he becomes most attractive, important, and desired by her. This is the highest form of power that I spoke about at the very beginning. This is not the power of a tyrant, it is the power of a master who knows exactly the price of his choice and his devotion. Think about it. Most men spend their entire lives trying to hold on to a woman, constantly doubting themselves, trying to earn her attention, her intimacy, her loyalty. But the truth is that you can only hold on to someone who wants to leave. And when a man reaches this seventh stage, it simply does not occur to a woman to go anywhere. She herself strives to be part of such a union, because she feels that this is the only way for her to be next to someone who has gone all the way to the end and has become truly free. This is the very silence inside you that is worth any scream at the beginning of the journey. You are no longer playing games. You are not manipulating. You are just living. And this truth of yours attracts more strongly than any drug. Now that you have heard about this architecture, I want you to stop and ask yourself one question, the answer to which may be the most difficult in your life. Which of these stages are you at now? And are you ready to take the step to the next, realizing that it will require not just beautiful words from you, but real daily work on your inner structure? Do not rush to answer. Keep it to yourself, or, if you feel ready to share, describe your story in the comments. Write which stage was the most painful, and at which you realized it was time to change something. Your story may become the very brick that will help someone else build their path to this true, deep intimacy. This material was not created for you to just watch and forget. It was created so that you would leave it with the realization that your entire past life was just preparation for that very real intimacy that you have not even had a chance to touch yet. Make this choice today. And remember, every step you take forward is what distinguishes a man who lives by the laws of his will from one who allows chance to determine his fate. Remain in silence after these words. Let this script grow in your consciousness, and tomorrow you will look at your relationships with completely different eyes. You have become a different person, and now the choice is yours.